It was a bright Monday morning when the hospital's corridors seemed unusually busy, filled with the hurried footsteps of nurses, doctors, and patients, yet among all the activity, a young nurse walked in with a mixture of excitement and nervousness. Her name was Aaliyah, and she had just graduated from nursing school, full of energy, ambition, and a desire to make a difference, yet she knew that entering such a large hospital meant facing challenges she had never imagined before. Aaliyah was aware that hospitals could be tough places, where experience often mattered more than fresh knowledge, and where new nurses were sometimes underestimated or overlooked, but she felt ready. She had studied long hours, spent countless nights practicing her skills, and had dreamed about the moment she would finally wear her nurse's uniform and step into the real world. As she walked through the main entrance, the smell of antiseptic and the constant beeping of machines immediately reminded her that this was no ordinary place. It was a place where lives were saved, and where every decision mattered. She adjusted her uniform and took a deep breath, feeling the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders, but instead of fear, she felt a surge of determination. She knew that this was her chance to prove herself, to show that she belonged here just as much as anyone else, and to help patients who needed her care. The first few moments were overwhelming. Doctors hurried past, speaking in medical jargon she barely understood yet tried to follow, while nurses exchanged quick greetings and moved efficiently from one patient to another. Aaliyah noticed how experienced the staff looked, how confident their movements were, and for a brief moment, doubt crept in. Could she really keep up? Could she handle the fast pace and the pressure? But she reminded herself of everything she had learned, of all the hours she had spent preparing for this moment, and pushed those doubts aside. She smiled politely at everyone she passed and tried to seem as confident as she could, even though inside, her heart was racing. As she reported to the head nurse, she was introduced to the ward, its patients, and the daily routines she would be expected to follow. The head nurse explained how things worked, pointing out where supplies were kept, the routines for patient care, and the importance of accuracy in every task. Aaliyah listened carefully, taking notes in her mind, wanting to absorb everything she could. She noticed, however, that some of the senior staff barely looked at her. They made small comments under their breath, exchanged glances that made it clear they were skeptical of the new nurse. She overheard whispers like, "Let's see if she can handle it," and, "I hope she knows what she's doing," which made her stomach twist with a mix of anxiety and determination. Despite the skepticism, Aaliyah did her best to focus on the patients. She walked to the first room, where an elderly woman was struggling to get comfortable in her bed. Aaliyah introduced herself with a warm smile, explaining what she was going to do, and helped her adjust her pillow and blanket, all while talking gently to put the patient at ease. The woman's eyes lit up with gratitude, and Aaliyah felt a little spark of reassurance inside her. This was why she had chosen nursing, to make a difference in people's lives. She began to understand that even though some staff might doubt her, the patient's reactions mattered more, and every small act of kindness and competence would count. Throughout the morning, Aaliyah moved from patient to patient, learning the routines, listening to doctors' instructions, and taking careful notes. She found herself absorbing every detail, every instruction, and every small tip from her colleagues who were willing to share their knowledge. At the same time, she felt the weight of judgment from others who didn't believe she could handle the pressure. Some nurses were curt, doctors barely acknowledged her presence, and she had to remind herself constantly to stay calm, stay professional, and stay focused on the patients rather than the criticism. By midday, Aaliyah had experienced a mixture of emotions, excitement, anxiety, and determination all rolled into one. She realized that being a nurse wasn't just about following instructions, it was about empathy, patience, and the ability to remain calm under pressure. She had already faced her first challenge, proving to herself that she could step into a demanding environment without faltering, despite the doubt around her. And as she walked down the corridor carrying supplies for the next patient, she made a silent promise to herself. She would not let anyone's skepticism define her abilities, she would earn respect through her actions, and she would care for every patient with all the dedication she could muster. As the morning ended and she finally took a short break, Aaliyah looked around the bustling ward and felt a mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration. She realized that the real test was only beginning, that there would be many moments when she would have to prove her worth, not just to the staff, but to herself. Yet, for the first time, she felt that spark of confidence, the inner knowledge that she had chosen the right path, and that no matter what challenges lay ahead, she was ready to face them with courage, skill, and heart. Aaliyah's first week at the hospital was nothing like she had imagined. While she had expected a learning curve, she had not anticipated just how tough it would be to prove herself in a place where experience often outweighed talent. Every day felt like a test, not just of her skills, but of her patience, resilience, and courage. From the moment she arrived in the morning, she could feel the judgment of some of the senior staff, sharp glances, whispered comments, and occasionally, curt instructions that seemed designed to make her falter rather than guide her. The first challenge came in the form of a particularly demanding doctor, Dr. Callahan, a veteran who had worked in the hospital for over 20 years. He rarely spoke to new staff unless absolutely necessary, and when he did, his tone was often sharp, bordering on dismissive. On her second day, Aaliyah was asked to assist him during a routine patient check. She had prepared carefully, memorized all the procedures, and was ready to follow every instruction perfectly. Yet, as she reached for the necessary instruments, Dr. Callahan barely glanced at her and muttered, "Be careful. I don't have time for mistakes." The weight of his words could have shaken anyone, but Aaliyah forced herself to take a deep breath, focus on her training, and proceed with precision, determined not to let his doubt define her performance. While the doctors tested her confidence, the other nurses were a different kind of challenge. Some were welcoming, offering tips and small acts of encouragement, while others seemed to see her as a threat or an intruder. Every time she asked a question, a few of them would roll their eyes or give vague answers, as if questioning why a new girl needed help at all. Aaliyah soon realized that surviving in this environment required not just medical knowledge, but emotional strength, the ability to ignore judgment, and the courage to stand firm in the face of subtle hostility. Even patients, though generally kind, sometimes reflected the hospital's general atmosphere. A few would question her experience, asking if she was really qualified, and Aaliyah learned to respond with calm confidence, explaining her training and intentions without letting frustration show. She discovered that empathy and professionalism could sometimes speak louder than years of experience. With each patient she helped, she felt a quiet sense of victory, knowing that she was already making a difference, even if her colleagues hadn't noticed yet. One of the most challenging moments came when she was asked to handle a patient with severe post-surgical pain. The doctors were occupied elsewhere, and the senior nurse was on break, leaving Aaliyah to manage the situation alone. The patient was anxious and in discomfort, and the room was filled with the tense energy of someone in pain. Aaliyah remained calm, speaking gently, checking the vitals, adjusting medication under strict guidelines, and offering reassurance that helped the patient feel safer. By the time the senior nurse returned, the patient's condition had stabilized, and Aaliyah had earned a subtle, but visible nod of approval, a small acknowledgement that her competence was real. Yet not every day ended on a positive note. There were moments when mistakes seemed inevitable, forgetting a form, misplacing a supply, or misunderstanding an instruction. Each time, Aaliyah felt a sting of embarrassment and doubt. But slowly, she began to see that mistakes were not signs of failure, they were lessons, each one teaching her resilience, careful attention, and humility. She started keeping a small notebook, jotting down every detail she learned, every correction she received, and every patient response she observed, turning every challenge into an opportunity for growth. By the end of the week, Aaliyah realized that surviving in this hospital required a balance of skill, courage, and emotional intelligence. The whispers and skepticism of the staff were no longer paralyzing, instead, they became fuel for her determination. She understood that respect could not be demanded, it had to be earned through consistent, thoughtful action. And in a hospital where every decision could impact life or death, she was learning that even a young, new nurse could make a meaningful difference. Aaliyah ended her first week exhausted, yet proud. She had faced judgment, doubt, and challenges that tested her resolve, and she had come through stronger, more confident, and more determined than ever. She knew that the real tests were still ahead, that each day would bring new patients, new emergencies, and new opportunities to prove herself, but for the first time, she felt a sense of belonging. She was no longer just a new nurse, she was a nurse who had faced her first challenges and emerged with courage, skill, and heart. The hospital ward buzzed with the usual energy, monitors beeping, nurses hurrying down corridors, and doctors consulting charts, but the calm routine was about to be shattered. Word had spread quickly that a highly decorated SEAL commander was being admitted after sustaining severe injuries during a dangerous mission overseas. Whispers of anticipation filled the halls. This was no ordinary patient. He was a war hero, someone who had faced life-and-death situations countless times, yet now, he was lying vulnerable, dependent on the care of a team of medical professionals. Aaliyah felt a surge of both excitement and nervousness when she heard the news. She had trained for critical care situations, but handling a patient of this magnitude was something entirely different. The SEAL commander's reputation preceded him, disciplined, fearless, and commanding respect wherever he went. To think that she, a new nurse, might be assisting in his care made her heart race. She reminded herself that no matter his status, her responsibility was the same: provide skilled, compassionate care, and stay calm under pressure. When the commander arrived, the scene was intense. A team of doctors and nurses moved swiftly to stabilize him, carefully monitoring his vitals and managing his injuries. His body bore the marks of battle, deep wounds, bruising, and the signs of immense trauma that left no room for error. The atmosphere was tense, every decision mattered, every movement had to be precise. Aaliyah felt her pulse quicken, but she squared her shoulders and stepped forward, ready to take her place in the team. At first, she was kept at a distance. The senior nurses and doctors handled the initial assessments, checking tubes, monitors, and medications. Aaliyah observed everything closely, mentally preparing for the moment when she would be called to act. She noticed the commander's calm, controlled demeanor despite the obvious pain, the way he gave short, clear instructions when needed, and how even in his vulnerable state, he carried himself with the authority of a leader. It was both inspiring and intimidating. As the hours passed, it became clear that the commander's injuries were complex. His recovery would require constant monitoring, skilled care, and a delicate balance of medical expertise. Aaliyah was finally asked to assist in his routine checks, monitoring his vitals, ensuring he was comfortable, and reporting any changes immediately. She moved carefully, conscious of every detail, aware that even the smallest mistake could have consequences. Despite the pressure, she found a strange sense of calm in the rhythm of her work, focusing on one task at a time. The commander, perceptive and observant, noticed her dedication. Unlike many patients, he paid attention not just to medical actions but to attitude and professionalism. He watched as Aaliyah gently adjusted ensured that he was positioned correctly to reduce pain, and spoke in a reassuring tone. Even though he was a decorated soldier, dependent on her care made him respect competence above all else. Some of the senior staff still doubted her. They whispered doubts about whether a new nurse could handle a patient of such importance, whether she had the skill to notice subtle changes in his condition. But Aaliyah didn't let it distract her. Instead, she focused on building trust with the commander, showing patience, diligence, and calm in every action. Slowly, she realized that respect in the hospital wasn't just about seniority or reputation, it was about skill, reliability, and heart. By the end of the first day, Aaliyah had established a silent connection with the SEAL commander. He had seen her work tirelessly, noticed her attention to detail, and appreciated her calm reassurance amidst chaos. While others judged her based on her inexperience, he judged her by her actions, and she had earned his quiet respect. It was a small victory, but one that made her heart swell with pride. She knew that in the days ahead, her dedication would be tested again and again, but she also realized that she was capable of rising to the challenge, even with one of the most formidable patients she had ever encountered. That night, as Aaliyah left the ward, exhausted but exhilarated, she understood something profound: the hospital was no longer just a place of work. It was a stage where courage, skill, and compassion were tested daily, and where even a new nurse could make a powerful difference. The arrival of the SEAL commander had transformed her experience, showing her that real respect is earned, not given, and that sometimes, the most extraordinary opportunities come disguised as the most daunting challenges. The hospital ward, usually a place of routine and order, had shifted into something closer to a battlefield. Tension hung in the air like a heavy fog, every beep from monitors and every hurried footstep magnifying the pressure. For Aaliyah, the excitement of working with the SEAL commander had quickly transformed into a trial of nerves and skill. The senior doctors watched her closely, their skepticism still palpable. Each move she made seemed to be under scrutiny, every instruction she followed measured and judged. The whispers, once faint, now seemed louder. "She's too new for this, let's see if she can actually handle it, I hope she doesn't make a mistake." The rising tension was not only from the staff, the SEAL commander's condition was far more complicated than anyone had anticipated. His injuries, severe and varied, required constant monitoring. Even small fluctuations in his vital signs could indicate major complications. Every time he shifted in bed, every lab result that came back, the pressure on the medical team increased. Aaliyah felt a knot tighten in her stomach, knowing that the smallest oversight could have serious consequences. She was determined not to let her nerves show. Her hands were steady, her mind focused, but inside, her heart raced with the responsibility that had suddenly fallen on her shoulders. Dr. Callahan, the senior physician who had already expressed doubt in her abilities, began giving her instructions in a tone that bordered on hostile. "Check his vitals again," he barked one afternoon, "and make sure you report any irregularities immediately. This isn't a routine patient, and I don't want surprises." Aaliyah nodded calmly, even as a surge of anxiety threatened to overwhelm her. She reminded herself that respect was earned through action, not fear. She moved to the commander's side, gently adjusting the monitors, checking his pulse, and noting every subtle change. The commander, ever observant, noticed her meticulous care. He didn't speak much, but the brief glance he gave her, a silent acknowledgement of her competence, was enough to bolster her confidence. Despite his injuries, he was aware of everything happening around him, and Aaliyah realized that he valued precision, patience, and calm above all else. For the first time, she felt that her work had meaning beyond approval from colleagues, it mattered to someone who truly understood the stakes of life and death. Even so, the tension escalated when a sudden complication arose. One of the SEAL commander's wounds began showing signs of infection, and alarms on the monitors began to beep urgently. The senior staff rushed in, voices raised, issuing instructions faster than Aaliyah could process. But she didn't panic. She focused on her training, recalling every procedure she had learned, and assisted where needed with steady hands. The room was a whirlwind of urgency, but Aaliyah's calm presence anchored her in the chaos. She adjusted 4 lines, monitored vitals, and reassured the patient without a single tremor in her voice. Through this challenge, she noticed subtle shifts in the attitudes of some staff members. The nurses who had whispered doubts earlier now exchanged glances of surprise. They had seen her maintain composure under pressure, keep her focus even as tension peaked, and provide real, effective care when it mattered most. It was a quiet acknowledgement that she was not just a new nurse, she was someone who could rise to the occasion when the situation demanded it. By the end of the day, the intensity of the crisis had passed, and the commander was stable again. Aaliyah stepped back for a moment, her body exhausted but her mind sharp. She realized that this was only the beginning. Each new challenge, each skeptical glance, each tense moment was part of a larger test, not just of her skills, but of her character, patience, and courage. The tension that had weighed heavily on her all day had transformed into a determination she had never felt before, a drive to prove, not boast, her worth through actions, competence, and compassion. As she walked down the corridor, finally able to take a brief breath, Aaliyah understood something crucial: rising tension was not an obstacle, it was a measure of her growth. Every high-pressure moment, every critical decision, every skeptical glance from colleagues was a chance to demonstrate her strength and resilience. She had survived the day, helped a hero recover, and earned quiet respect, not from words, but from the confidence others could see in her calm, capable actions. The next morning, the hospital ward was quieter than usual, but the tension that had been building all week still lingered in the air. Aaliyah arrived early, her mind focused, her heart steady, knowing that today could define not just her reputation, but her own confidence in herself. The SEAL commander's condition remained delicate. Although he had stabilized after the previous day's scare, every nurse and doctor knew that stability could be fragile, and any lapse in care could have serious consequences. Aaliyah was assigned to assist in a complex procedure, a minor surgical dressing change on one of the commander's deep wounds. While it was a routine procedure for experienced nurses, the high stakes of the commander's injuries made it feel anything but routine. The senior nurses watched closely, some with skeptical glances, others with quiet curiosity, waiting to see if the new nurse could handle the pressure. Aaliyah felt the weight of their expectations, but instead of fear, she felt a surge of determination. She reminded herself that she had prepared for this moment, and she was ready to act with skill, precision, and calm. As she approached the commander's bedside, she noticed the subtle signs of discomfort and anxiety on his face. Even the most disciplined soldiers could not hide vulnerability when in pain, and she understood that her role was not only medical but emotional as well. She spoke softly, explaining each step of the process, and offered reassurance in a way that was professional yet compassionate. Her hands moved with steady confidence, carefully removing the old dressing, cleaning the wound, and preparing the new one. Every motion was deliberate, precise, and careful, reflecting the hours of training she had invested and the lessons she had learned in the past week. Suddenly, a complication arose. The commander winced sharply, and she noticed a small but concerning swelling near the wound. It required immediate attention. The senior doctor overseeing the procedure began to raise his voice, directing instructions rapidly, while other nurses started moving around with urgent efficiency. In that moment, many would have frozen under the pressure, but Aaliyah remained calm. She assessed the situation, remembered the protocols she had studied, and acted without hesitation. She alerted the doctor to the swelling, prepared the necessary tools, and assisted seamlessly, anticipating every instruction before it was even given. The room was filled with a mix of controlled chaos and silent tension, but Aaliyah's composure became a steady anchor. Even the SEAL commander, usually stoic, seemed to sense her confidence, relaxing slightly under her calm touch. The senior nurses who had doubted her before exchanged glances of surprise, realizing that this young, new nurse was handling a critical situation with more poise than some of them might have at her experience level. Every careful movement, every calm word, and every correct action demonstrated that she belonged in this demanding environment. By the time the procedure was complete, the commander's wound was properly dressed, his pain managed, and the risk of infection minimized. Aaliyah stepped back, exhausted but filled with a deep sense of pride. For the first time, the skepticism of her colleagues felt less like a burden and more like a challenge she had successfully met. She had not only performed her duties but had done so in a way that inspired confidence in those around her, including the very patients she was there to care for. Later, during a quiet moment, the SEAL commander gave her a small nod, a simple, unspoken acknowledgement of her skill, courage, and calm under pressure. It was a subtle gesture, but for Aaliyah, it meant more than any words of praise from her colleagues. He had seen her ability firsthand, and in that moment, she realized that respect was truly earned through action, not seniority or reputation. By the end of the day, the atmosphere in the ward had begun to shift. Aaliyah noticed fewer skeptical glances and more subtle acknowledgments of her competence. Her colleagues began to see her not just as the new nurse, but as someone who could handle high-pressure situations, someone who had proven herself when it mattered most. And for Aaliyah, that was more than validation, it was a confirmation that she was growing into the nurse she had always wanted to be, capable of meeting challenges with courage, skill, and heart. The days that followed the SEAL commander's critical procedure were intense, yet something had shifted in the hospital. Aaliyah felt at the moment she stepped onto the ward, the subtle change in the air, the way some of the senior nurses glanced at her with a measure of acknowledgement, the way the doctors seemed slightly more willing to include her in discussions. It wasn't loud praise or dramatic recognition, but it was enough to tell her that her efforts were being noticed. After the week she had endured, the skepticism that had once seemed like a constant weight had begun to lift, replaced by something new, respect earned through action, not demanded by title. The SEAL commander himself had become a quiet but powerful ally in her journey. Though he rarely spoke more than necessary, every time Aaliyah performed a task with care and precision, he noticed. When she monitored his vitals, adjusted his position to relieve pressure on his injuries, or anticipated his needs before he asked, he gave her small gestures of acknowledgement, a nod, a brief smile, even a word of thanks that carried more weight than any formal accolade. These gestures, though subtle, were deeply meaningful. To earn the respect of a man trained to observe, analyze, and command under extreme conditions was no small feat, and Aaliyah felt a growing confidence that her actions mattered. Even the staff who had doubted her abilities began to soften. Some of the senior nurses who had whispered behind her back now offered small words of guidance, not out of superiority but out of collaboration. Doctors who had barely looked her way began including her in discussions about patient care, occasionally asking for her input on minor decisions. Aaliyah noticed these changes, but she remained grounded, knowing that respect was not about praise, it was about trust, reliability, and competence consistently demonstrated over time. One day, a sudden complication arose. Another patient, unrelated to the SEAL commander, required urgent attention, and the ward became chaotic. Monitors beeped frantically, alarms sounded, and staff rushed to respond. Aaliyah, already familiar with high-pressure situations, moved decisively, assisting where needed, calming patients, and keeping track of instructions from multiple doctors at once. Even the SEAL commander, who was resting but alert, observed from his bed and gave a subtle nod of approval. Her ability to remain composed, organized, and effective in the midst of chaos had not gone unnoticed, and slowly, her colleagues began to see her as someone who could handle responsibility under pressure. It wasn't long before the senior doctors and nurses began to acknowledge her in small but significant ways. Dr. Callahan, who had been her harshest critic, asked her to monitor an especially delicate patient on his own, a quiet vote of confidence that she recognized immediately. The moment carried weight, it was proof that her consistent performance had shifted perception, turning skepticism into trust. Aaliyah also began to notice the effect she had on the younger nurses and interns. They observed her calm approach to challenges, her meticulous attention to detail, and her quiet determination. She had become a role model, not by seeking attention, but by demonstrating competence, patience, and empathy. This realization filled her with a quiet pride. She was not just earning respect for herself, but inspiring others to rise above doubt and focus on excellence. Perhaps the most meaningful moment came when the SEAL commander, now able to speak more comfortably, looked directly at her and said, "Thank you. You handled everything with skill and calm when it mattered most." Not everyone could have done that. Though the words were simple, the respect they conveyed was profound. He saluted her, not just as a patient thanking a nurse, but as a warrior acknowledging someone who had proven herself in the face of pressure. Aaliyah's journey through skepticism, tension, and challenge had led to this moment. She had earned respect not through confrontation, not through seeking approval, but through consistent action, competence, and courage. In the halls of the hospital, whispers of doubt had transformed into nods of acknowledgement, quiet gestures of trust, and genuine appreciation. She had proven herself not only to the SEAL commander but to everyone around her, and in that recognition, she found not only pride, but a deeper understanding of her own strength. After weeks of long shifts, tense moments, and quiet perseverance, Aaliyah finally began to feel the tangible effects of her hard work. The ward had gradually transformed from a place of skepticism and subtle judgment into one where her presence was not only accepted but valued. Colleagues who had once doubted her abilities now sought her guidance on patient care, asking for her input on procedures and sometimes even quietly admiring the composure she displayed under pressure. She had become a steady presence in the chaos of the hospital, a symbol of calm, skill, and dedication. The turning point came on a busy afternoon when the hospital administration called for a meeting. Aaliyah had been summoned, though she wasn't sure why, and the anticipation caused her heart to race. She had worked tirelessly without expecting recognition, but something in her gut told her that today was different. As she entered the room, she saw her supervisors, senior nurses, and even Dr. Callahan waiting with attentive expressions. The SEAL commander was also present, sitting with a quiet authority that immediately drew the attention of everyone in the room. The hospital director began speaking, acknowledging the challenges of the past weeks and the exceptional circumstances surrounding the commander's care. "We have seen extraordinary dedication and skill in our staff," he said, his voice steady. "But one nurse, in particular, has consistently demonstrated courage, professionalism, and compassion beyond her years of experience." Aaliyah's heart skipped a beat as the room's eyes turned toward her. Her name was mentioned with a tone of respect she had never heard before, and she felt a mixture of pride, disbelief, and gratitude. Dr. Callahan, who had been her harshest critic, stepped forward and offered a rare, sincere smile. "I admit, I doubted her at first," he said, his voice carrying across the room. "But she has proven that skill, patience, and determination matter more than tenure or reputation. She has handled high-pressure situations with precision and grace, and I have learned to trust her judgment." The acknowledgement from someone who had once dismissed her efforts left Aaliyah speechless, yet deeply moved. Then the SEAL commander rose from his chair. His presence alone commanded attention, and when he looked at Aaliyah, there was no doubt in his expression. "I have faced some of the most challenging missions in the world," he said, "and I have rarely encountered someone with the calm, focus, and determination that this nurse has shown. She earned my respect through action, not words, and in my eyes, she is nothing short of remarkable." He saluted her, a gesture steeped in military tradition, carrying immense significance. For Aaliyah, the salute symbolized more than recognition, it was an acknowledgement of her courage, competence, and unwavering dedication. The room erupted in quiet applause, colleagues smiling, nodding, and even offering congratulations that felt genuine. For the first time, Aaliyah fully understood the impact of her journey. She had started as a new nurse, met with doubt and skepticism, yet she had persevered, remained composed under pressure, and consistently demonstrated excellence. The recognition she received now was not superficial, it was earned, and it resonated deeply. Beyond the official acknowledgement, Aaliyah noticed subtle changes in everyday life on the ward. Senior nurses asked for her advice on procedures, doctors included her in critical discussions, and even patients seemed to sense her confidence and competence. She had become a role model not by seeking attention, but by showing that persistence, skill, and compassion could overcome doubt and prejudice. As she left the meeting, Aaliyah felt a profound sense of fulfillment. She realized that recognition was not just about accolades or public acknowledgement, it was about the quiet respect that comes from proving oneself under pressure, from earning trust through action, and from showing courage when it mattered most. She had not only earned the respect of her colleagues and the SEAL commander but had also discovered a deeper confidence in her own abilities. In that moment, Aaliyah understood something she had suspected but never truly realized until now: true recognition is never given lightly. It is earned through perseverance, professionalism, and heart. And she had earned it, fully, and irrevocably. The hospital corridors were quieter that evening, bathed in the soft glow of overhead lights, yet the energy in the ward had changed. Where doubt and skepticism had once lingered, there was now respect, admiration, and a subtle sense of hope. Aaliyah walked through the hallways with a quiet confidence, her uniform crisp, her movements calm and purposeful, carrying the knowledge that she had not only survived her first weeks but had thrived in the face of extraordinary challenges. Every patient she passed, every colleague who offered a nod or a smile, reminded her that she had earned her place here. It had been a journey marked by trials. From the first day she stepped into the bustling hospital, she had faced judgment, doubt, and subtle prejudice. She had been tested by the high expectations of seasoned doctors, the skeptical whispers of senior nurses, and the intense pressure of caring for patients whose lives depended on every decision she made. Yet through it all, she had remained composed, focused, and compassionate, proving again and again that dedication, skill, and heart mattered more than experience or reputation. The turning point, of course, had been the SEAL commander. A man who had faced the most dangerous situations in the world now relied on her care, and through her calm professionalism, she had earned not only his trust but his deep respect. His salute, given with the weight of honor and recognition, had been a moment of triumph unlike any other. It was a validation of her courage, her competence, and her unwavering commitment to her patients. More than that, it had been a reminder that true respect is earned through action, not titles, and that even the youngest or newest among us can rise to extraordinary heights when determination meets opportunity. But Aaliyah's victory extended beyond the commander's acknowledgement. The hospital itself had changed in subtle ways. Colleagues who had doubted her now sought her advice, trusted her judgment, and treated her as a reliable, capable professional. Her actions had not only shifted perceptions but had inspired others. Junior nurses and interns watched her closely, learning that confidence, empathy, and persistence were just as important as technical skill. She had become a symbol of perseverance, a quiet reminder that even in the face of skepticism, one could succeed by staying true to oneself. Reflecting on the journey, Aaliyah understood that her story was about more than just personal achievement. It was about the power of resilience, the importance of empathy in high-pressure environments, and the impact of courage when confronting doubt. She had discovered that real triumph is measured not by accolades alone, but by the lives touched, the respect earned, and the inspiration left behind for others to follow. She had transformed not only her own path but also the environment around her, proving that talent, dedication, and heart could break through barriers that once seemed insurmountable. In the quiet moments after her shift, Aaliyah often thought of the patients she had cared for, the challenges she had overcome, and the people whose perceptions she had changed, not through confrontation, but through action. Each small success had built upon the last, and each acknowledgement, whether from a patient, a colleague, or the SEAL commander himself, had reinforced a simple truth: excellence, integrity, and compassion always shine through. By the time she left the hospital that evening, the sun had set, and the city outside was alive with lights and motion. Yet Aaliyah felt a calm clarity inside herself. She had arrived as the new nurse who was doubted, overlooked, and underestimated. She was leaving, at least for the day, as someone who had earned respect, made a tangible difference, and inspired those around her. She carried with her not only the gratitude of her patients but also the quiet satisfaction of knowing that she had proven herself in the most challenging circumstances. Her story, though personal, held a universal lesson. No matter where one begins, no matter the doubts cast by others, courage, perseverance, and unwavering commitment can transform skepticism into respect, fear into confidence, and opportunity into triumph. Aaliyah had not only survived the hospital, she had mastered it, leaving a legacy of inspiration that would ripple through the ward long after her shift ended. In every quiet gesture, every life touched, and every nod of acknowledgement, she had proven that greatness often starts with the courage to simply step forward and never give up.